Boatworks Today is a viewer-supported show. To learn more on how you can get involved and watch extended ad-free versions of these videos, please visit our website, boatworkstoday.com, and click on the top of the heading where it says Support This Show. Thank you. So let's get back to our project and finally start laying some glass. Now, to get to this point, before I could even start cutting glass, I needed to make some templates of the areas that we're going to be glassing over. Now, they aren't anything fancy. I think right here I just used some regular old rolled up paper, but you could also use cardboard. That would work just as fine, except I kind of felt that the paper was going to be a little bit easier to cut and to work with. Each of the areas up on deck are going to be getting 7 layers total of glass. So it's going to be 4 layers of 1.5 ounce chop strand, and then 3 layers of 1708. So here you see me numbering them. Layers 1, 3, 5, and 7 are going to be chop strand, and 2, 4, and 6 are going to be 1708. With all the pieces cut, it's time to head up on deck. Now, this first piece that I'm laying down here is 1.5 ounce chop strand mat, and I cut this so that it is exactly the size of the exposed core area. Like, this layer is not meant to extend out and tab into any of the surrounding areas. Right now, before I can get to that point, I need to build up this core area first, just to build it up a little bit, and then I can start making each of my pieces a little bit larger and larger and larger so that they eventually do start tabbing into the surrounding area. Now, the second layer is 1708, and what you're going to see me doing here is I'm going to be coming back over with a fin roller on every other coat. Using a fin roller over top of chop strand matting can sometimes be a little tricky. Sometimes the little fibers get rolled up inside the fin roller itself, and it just makes a mess. But 1708 does not do that. It just gives you a nice smooth surface, and nothing can get hung up on the roller, and it works. It just works real well. If I remember right, I think it's starting with this third piece that the pieces that I'm laying down are starting to get a little bit larger. So now I'm starting to actually tie into the surrounding area. And I'm going to continue to repeat this process. So I'll be going chop strand and then 1708, and then going back over those 2 layers with the fin roller to get all the air bubbles out, and then rinse and repeat. Now, starting with layer 3, each of the layers, so 4, 5, 6, and 7, are each going to be a little bit larger than the previous. So now this is where I actually start tying the repaired area into the surrounding deck. After all 7 layers of glass are down, I'm not sure exactly how thick this laminate's going to be, but I'm guessing it's going to be pretty close to 1/4 inch thick, which for a top skin on a deck is, well, a little ridiculous in my opinion, but that's how this whole boat was built. It's just extremely overbuilt. Now, I know that I'm going to have quite a few people asking what kind of roller it is that I'm using here. And the roller that I'm using in what I typically use for doing all my glass work, it's called Glass Coater with a K. And I believe it's made by Corona. Not the beer, the roller company. A couple weeks ago, I made a video on a cleaner way to grind fiberglass using, I think it was a little 1 1/8 inch Makita belt sander. Now, this is not that sander. This is a 4 inch wide or it's called a 4 by 24. But this particular sander is anything but clean. It actually makes one hell of a mess, but it makes very quick work of the surface that you're trying to grind down. It's not as messy as using a grinder, like a rotary grinder, but it still makes a hell of a mess. I was so, oh my god, I was itchy after this, but it made very quick work of it, and it also levels the entire surface off, helps to, I guess, smooth out that transition between what was new material and the old deck. So it's a good tool. It's a good tool for this process. But I should have been wearing a Tyvek suit. I wouldn't have been anywhere near as itchy. One huge advantage I will say about this sander is that you're able to sand up tight to an edge, so up to the side of the cabin or on the side of the tow rail. If you'd like a link for where you can purchase this, I'll include it down in the description. With all of these areas now sanded and wiped clean with acetone, I'm just going to do one last little walk around just to make sure that everything looks good before we move on to our next step. I'm going to be fairing all of these surfaces in using thickened epoxy, specifically West System and their 410 filler. And I'm going to be mixing this, a little bit on the loose side, probably along the lines of, say, like a maple syrup consistency. And the reason that I'm mixing it this loose is that, well, one, I want it to be easy to work with and trowel out, but I also want it to be loose enough to where it can kind of flow in and fill and level on its own any of the low spots or dimples or the weave or the texture of this top layer of glass. And this stuff really just spreads like butter. It is such a nice material to work with. Now I am going to have to come back and do some touch-ups on, I'm trying to remember, I think it was there were two areas specifically that I had to come back and kind of rework a little bit, add a little bit more filler just because there were some low spots, but for the most part, most of these areas, to include this one right here and the one forward of it, after this application, they were done. One of the little quirks of using this 410 filler to thicken the epoxy is that as the epoxy starts to cure, it generates some heat. While as it gets warmer, this thickened epoxy becomes more thin. So if you're not careful, if you don't keep an eye on it, it can have a tendency to kind of start sagging and kind of sliding on you. Now, there is another additive that you can mix in with this stuff to essentially completely prevent that, and that's by adding in their 406, their silica filler. Usually, I do say 25% of the silica, and then the rest of that using the 410 to get it to a nice, or at least to get it to the consistency that I'm looking for. Adding in that 406 pretty much eliminates all the sag factor out of it. Now, it may still run away from you on a completely vertical surface, but on something like this, it ain't going anywhere. If this is your first time here, I'd love to have you subscribe to this channel. And as always, if you enjoyed this kind of content, please give it a thumbs up and share it on your social media. As always, if you have any questions, comments, please leave those down below. And until next time, thanks for watching.
This has been a Boatworks Today Protection.